Welcome back, everyone. Settle in, because today, we are going to take a long, deep, and profoundly necessary journey into the architecture of the human mind. I want you to imagine, for a second, the year 1942. The world is literally on fire. You have the Second World War raging, empires clashing, entire cities being reduced to ash, and humanity seemingly standing on the edge of an active volcano fueled by boundless greed, imperialism, and ego. The noise of the world is deafening. The anxiety is palpable. And right in the middle of this global dust and wind, a renowned Vietnamese scholar named Thursday John Nguyen Duy Can sits down to write a masterpiece. He doesn't write a manual on military tactics. He doesn't write a political manifesto. Instead, he writes a book about the mind. He writes, Sai Dum Qua Tan Nan, which translates to, The Courage of the Sage. Now, why does this matter to us today? Because right now, you and I are living in our own version of that volcano. We might not have global conventional warfare on our doorsteps, but we are bombarded by a digital storm. We are besieged by notifications, by outraged culture, by economic uncertainty, by the relentless pressure to react. We are living in an age of profound agitation. And what can argues in this brilliant, deeply layered text is that true strength, the kind of strength that actually changes the world, has absolutely nothing to do with physical violence, dominance, or being the loudest person in the room. True strength is found in a concept called dam, which roughly translates to equanimity. But I don't want you to think of equanimity as just taking a deep breath or doing a bit of mindfulness on a yoga mat. Ken is talking about something much more aggressive, much more foundational. He is talking about the state of being completely immovable. The ability to be the actor in your life, rather than the object being acted upon. Think about how often we are just reacting. Someone cuts you off in traffic, your blood pressure spikes. Your boss sends a passive-aggressive email, your weekend is ruined. You are being acted upon. The sage, however, possesses a superior personality. They are not molded by their environment, and they refuse to be swept away by the herd mentality. Ken acknowledges that becoming this kind of person might seem like an impossible dream, a utopian fantasy. But as he beautifully points out, ideals are the engines of human evolution. If even a handful of historical figures have achieved this state, then it is a beautiful dream worth chasing, not a delusion. To really understand this, we have to strip away our modern, Hollywood definition of courage. Ken breaks courage down into a hierarchy, and it is a fascinating progression. At the bottom, you have what he calls the fisherman's courage. This is the guy who sails out into the terrifying ocean, completely unafraid of sea monsters or rogue waves. It's physical bravery against nature. Step up from that, and you have the hunter's courage, the person who walks into the jungle, unafraid of the tiger. Step up again, and you reach the warrior's courage. This is the soldier standing on the battlefield, facing a wall of sharp blades and artillery, treating the imminent threat of death as if it were just another part of life. We usually stop there. We think the warrior is the peak of human bravery. But Ken says no. There is a fourth level. The highest level. The sage's courage. The sage's courage is entirely different because it requires no adrenaline. It is the deep, unshakable knowledge that success and failure, life and death, are ultimately matters of fate and timing. Let me tell you a story Ken uses to illustrate this, featuring Confucius. At one point in his life, Confucius and his disciples were traveling and found themselves surrounded and besieged at a place called Kuang. The situation was dire. They were trapped, starving, and facing imminent execution by a hostile mob. His disciples were panicking, pacing back and forth, terrified. And what was Confucius doing? He was sitting inside, calmly plucking his stringed instrument and singing. His top disciple, Zilu, is dumbfounded and asks, essentially, "Master, how can you play music at a time like this?" Confucius stops and explains something profound. He says that he has lived his life perfectly according to virtue. He has done everything within his control. Whether this mob breaks in and kills them, or whether they survive, is no longer up to him. It is a matter of fate, and it is a matter of timing. Because he truly understands that external danger is now completely beyond his control, there is absolutely zero utility in fear. The sage remains fearless because he has drawn a hard line between what is his business and what is the universe's business. There is a magnificent Japanese mythological fable Ken uses to drive this point home even further. Imagine a grand tournament among the gods to determine who will be the absolute master of the world. The first to step up is the god of lightning and storms. He unleashes hurricanes, shatters mountains, and darkens the sky. He represents raw, terrifying, destructive power. Everyone cowers. Next comes the god of music. Instead of violence, he plays a melody so intoxicating, so charming, that it hypnotizes the world. He proves that gentleness and seduction can conquer violence. But then comes the third god, the god of equanimity. This god just sits there. When the storms rage and the lightning strikes, he doesn't flinch. When the enchanting music plays, he doesn't sway. He is completely, totally unmoved by both terror and pleasure. And the judge of the tournament looks at this and immediately declares the god of equanimity the master of all. Why? Because the other gods could only control external things, weather, sound, other people's emotions. The god of equanimity conquered himself. He conquered his own internal sensations. And whoever controls themselves masters the world. Now, you might be listening to this and thinking, okay, this philosophy is beautiful. I want to be the god of equanimity. I want to be Confucius playing the lute while my life falls apart. But how? And this is where Ken's book takes a brilliant, hard left turn from abstract philosophy into raw physiology. He introduces the theory of vital energy, or Kai Luk. Ken argues that mental composure is biologically impossible if you do not have a specific type of physical and spiritual battery charge. He makes a crucial distinction between muscle strength and vital energy. We all know people who are built like Greek gods, massive muscles, physically imposing, but the second a real crisis hits, they crumble. They panic. They are cowards. Conversely, Ken points to Napoleon Bonaparte. Napoleon was short, not particularly muscular, and seemingly unimposing. Yet he possessed an immense, almost terrifying reserve of Kai Luk. He could work for 3 days and 3 nights straight, directing battles, reading maps, making high-stakes decisions without a drop of mental fatigue. His body obeyed his will perfectly. This vital energy is the bridge between the spirit and the flesh. If your spirit says, stay calm, but your vital energy is depleted, your body will betray you. Your hands will shake, your voice will crack, your heart will race. So, how do we accumulate this energy? We have to stop leaking it. And we leak it through what Ken calls agitation. I want you to picture a car. If you turn the key, put it in drive, and press the gas, the engine revs, the tires turn, and you move forward toward a destination. That is what Ken calls activity, or hodong. It is purposeful, conscious movement. But what happens if you put that same car in neutral and just slam your foot on the gas pedal? The engine screams, the car shakes violently, it burns through a massive amount of fuel, but it goes absolutely nowhere. That is agitation, or naodong. Most of us spend our entire lives in neutral, slamming on the gas. We fidget. We tap our feet. We complain about the weather. We argue with strangers on the internet. We shout when a normal voice would do. We dramatically wave our hands. Every single one of these useless, unconscious movements is a leak in your battery. Every time you react impulsively, you are bleeding out the very vital energy you need to maintain composure during a real crisis. To illustrate the discipline required to fix this, Ken tells the fable of the 2 gold seekers. 2 men are walking in the wilderness and discover a stream with tiny, almost invisible specks of gold dust in the mud. The first man looks at the dust and gets impatient. He says, "This is going to take forever. I'm going to go into the jungle, hunt rare exotic animals, and get rich quick." He represents impulsive, hyperactive bravery. The second man just sits down by the riverbank and painstakingly, speck by speck, begins extracting the gold dust. Fast forward a few years. The hunter has died of exhaustion and disease in the harsh jungle, having chased grand, impulsive illusions. The patient man, who sat by the river collecting invisible specks of gold day after day, is now unimaginably wealthy and powerful. The moral here is profound. Building the courage of the sage is exactly like collecting gold dust. You don't get it by suddenly deciding to be brave during a bank robbery. You build it by saving every tiny grain of energy from daily distractions. You build a bank account of power by choosing not to sigh loudly when the elevator is late. By choosing not to check your phone the second it buzzes. By choosing to sit perfectly still. This brings us to the actual training of the unconscious mind. Ken leans on the work of early 20th century thinkers like G. Sully de Morant and Émile Coué, exploring the idea that our cells actually possess a dim intelligence. Your body is a colony, and it takes its orders from the general consciousness, your will. But if you have zero discipline in your daily life, your cells learn that the general is weak. If you can't control what you eat, when you sleep, or how you react to a minor sugar craving, why on earth would your nervous system obey you when you are facing a life-destroying tragedy? Ken uses two brilliant analogies here. First, the horse. Imagine a rider who buys a magnificent warhorse. But during peacetime, the rider is lazy. He lets the horse wander off the path to eat grass, he lets it rest whenever it wants, he doesn't hold the reins tight. What happens when that rider takes that horse into battle? The moment the cannons fire, the horse will buck him off and run away. It has never been trained to submit its will to the rider. The second analogy is the military. If the general doesn't enforce strict rules about keeping uniforms clean and boots polished in the barracks, the entire army will instantly collapse and desert when they face the enemy. The method, therefore, is to practice winning over your smallest desires. Think about it. You are sitting at a restaurant, and they bring out a basket of warm bread. You want it. Your body is reaching for it. If you can stop your hand, pull it back, and consciously decide, "No, I am not eating that right now, purely as an exercise of my will," you have just won a battle. You have just trained your cellular intelligence to obey the general. These tiny, seemingly insignificant micro-victories accumulate. They are the gold dust. And eventually, they forge the great courage. Now, as we move deeper into Ken's philosophy, specifically into the second major section of his work, he starts looking at how this internal discipline physically manifests in our daily habits and social interactions. He draws heavily on historical Eastern figures and the wisdom of Yoritomo Tashi to prove that composure is not a genetic gift. You aren't just born with it. It is a highly disciplined craft. He points to the great Chinese statesman Nguyen Phan, known in Vietnamese as Tang Van Chinh. In his youth, Sim was not a sage. He was a normal guy who struggled with bad habits. He smoked too much, and he loved sleeping in. But when he realized his grand ambitions required total self-mastery, he didn't just casually try to cut back. He treated his smoking habit and his snooze button as literal mortal enemies. He waged war on them. Ken makes the brilliant observation that the exact same spiritual muscle Nguyen Phan used to quit smoking was the muscle he later used to defeat the massive Taiping rebellion. It's the same muscle. Greatness is born from intense, mundane self-conquest. We see this in other historical figures too, men who force themselves to read 10 pages of history every single day, or write 100 calligraphy characters daily, no matter what. These minor, unbreakable rules of conduct are the scaffolding of a superior human character. But here is where Ken introduces a psychological hack that is incredibly ahead of its time. We usually think that the mind controls the body. I feel calm, therefore I sit still. But Kan introduces the concept of outside in composure, or what he calls thoughts on the muscles. He argues that the body equally influences the mind. If you are terrified, but you physically force your muscles to mimic the state of calmness, your internal spirit will eventually get confused and align with your body. Have you ever heard the phrase, whistling in the dark? When people are walking down a creepy, unlit street, they sometimes start whistling a happy tune. They aren't whistling because they are brave, they are whistling to stave off the terror. The physical act of projecting nonchalance actually reduces the internal panic. Kan points to military salutes and religious kneeling. The rigid posture of a soldier at attention isn't just for show. The physical rigidity creates an internal psychological state of absolute obedience. Kneeling in prayer physically induces a state of humility and faith. He even tells the story of Dieudan, a famous actor who played Napoleon on stage for years. After inhabiting the physical gestures of the emperor for so long, the posture, the intense stare, the hand in the coat, Dieudan actually found his own personality changing. He became more decisive, more courageous in his real life, simply because his muscles had taught his brain how to be Napoleon. So, what is the practical application for us? Kan advises that when you are faced with a sudden loud noise, a sharp physical pain, or a frustrating delay, your first move shouldn't be to try and think calm thoughts. Your first move is to freeze. Cultivate a cold, determined gaze. Total physical stillness. Lock down the muscles, and the mind will follow. This physical restraint naturally extends into how we interact with others, which brings us to Kan's fascinating redefinition of etiquette, or l'adieu. In the modern West, we often view etiquette as a burden, a set of fake social rules we have to follow to be polite. But Kan views etiquette entirely differently. To him, etiquette is a tool for self-restraint. It is an armor against your own animalistic instincts. It is a discipline for the undisciplined. He draws a brilliant cultural contrast here. He notes that traditional Asian etiquette is inherently static. It focuses on restraint, hidden emotions, and moving slowly. Western etiquette, he argues, is more dynamic. To prove his point, he looks at clothing. Think about the traditional Asian wide-sleeved robes, the flowing garments of scholars and monks. Kan points out that these clothes act as a physical constraint. If you are wearing a massive, flowing robe, it is physically very difficult to make a sudden, jerky, aggressive movement. You can't just wildly punch someone or flail your arms without getting tangled. The clothing itself forces a delay. It forces you to move deliberately, and that physical delay creates a psychological space for thought. This restraint is the ultimate shield against provocation. Because to the sage, responding to an insult with another insult is what Kan calls the bravery of a commoner. It's basic. It's animal. True dignity is remaining totally unmoved by disrespect. There is a legendary Zen story about a master swordsman named Tokiyori. He is sitting in a room, and a Zen master, completely out of nowhere, slaps him across the face. Hard. Now, Tokiyori is a lethal warrior. His instinct, his training, would be to instantly draw his blade and kill the man who disrespected him. But what does Tokiyori do? He does absolutely nothing. He remains perfectly still. He doesn't even change his expression. In that moment, Tokiyori realized that controlling his own burning pride and anger was a vastly greater feat of great courage than leading an entire army to victory. Of course, maintaining this level of composure is incredibly difficult, which is why Kan emphasizes the importance of environmental shielding. Humans are mimetic creatures. We naturally imitate what we see and what we respect. Kan shares a personal habit. He always kept a statue of a Buddha head on his writing desk. Whenever he felt agitated, frustrated by his work, or annoyed by the world, he would just look at the serene, half-closed eyes of the Buddha. That visual anchor of absolute stillness helped him regain his own calm. By the same token, he gives a stern warning: you must ruthlessly curate your social circle. Stay away from impulsive, boastful, jittery, or chronically anxious friends. Their erratic energy is a virus, and it is highly contagious. You also have to shield yourself against the chaotic rhythm of life. Ken argues that the vast majority of our daily anxiety comes from being a slave to time. How do we break those chains? Through meticulous, boring, unsexy planning. By strictly scheduling your day, you assassinate the 3 roots of agitation. You kill haste, because you are never running late. You kill regret, because you don't forget things. And you kill anxiety, because you never have to sit around worrying about what you should be doing next. The schedule decides for you. But let's be honest. You can have the Buddha head on your desk, you can have your bullet journal perfectly color-coded, and life will still find a way to test you. And here is where Ken delivers one of his most piercing insights. He warns that true composure is not tested by the grand tragedies of life. It is tested by the trivial, unexpected annoyances. He tells the story of a student named Lao, who trained under the master Yoritomo Tashi. Lao was arrogant. He boasted to his master that his mind was so fortified, so perfectly composed, that if the sky itself began to fall, he wouldn't even blink. The master listens, nods, and decides to test this. Later that day, the master secretly instructs another student to walk past Lao and accidentally step heavily on Lao's beautiful, expensive silk sleeves, tearing them. The student does it, and Lao completely loses his mind. He explodes in a fit of screaming rage, cursing the student for ruining his clothes. The master steps in and points out the tragic irony. Lao had spent all his energy preparing his mind for a massive, apocalyptic disaster, the sky falling. But he was completely defeated by a clumsy foot and a torn piece of fabric. True equanimity means being unmoved by the sudden, the unjustified, and the petty. It is easy to be brave when the stakes are epic. It is incredibly hard to be brave when the stakes are merely annoying. Contrast Lao's failure with the stunning historical story of King Kan Kai and the assassin Yu Lai. Kan Kai was a powerful leader, but he was betrayed. The assassin Yu Lai manages to get close and drives a spear through the king. As Kan Kai is bleeding to death, his guards rush in, grab the assassin, and are about to tear him limb from limb. The dying king stops them. He looks at the man who just ended his life, and instead of exploding in rage or seeking petty revenge in his final moments, he genuinely admires the assassin's skill and bravery for pulling off such a daring mission. With his dying breath, the king orders his guards to release the assassin and let him live. That is the pinnacle of composure. That is a man who has completely conquered his own ego, even at the threshold of the abyss. And that word, ego, is the final boss in Ken's philosophy. As we transition into the third major segment of his work, he identifies the ego, the ban na, as the root of all human fear and agitation. If you are afraid, it is because you are afraid of losing something attached to your ego, your status, your wealth, your life, your reputation. Ken specifically diagnoses the fear of public opinion as a highly contagious, dangerous mental illness. We are terrified of what other people think of us. Now Ken admits that for the base person, the uneducated, unrefined masses, public opinion is actually a useful tool. The fear of being shamed by society keeps bad people from committing crimes or falling into utter vice. It acts as a behavioral fence. But for the superior individual, for the person seeking the courage of the sage, public opinion is a shackle. It is a prison. If you tailor your life to seek the praise of the crowd, or to avoid their criticism, you have surrendered your soul. You are no longer the actor, you are the puppet. Ken quotes the philosopher Blaise Pascal, who said, "Public opinion is the master of the world. To achieve true composure, you must drag that master off its throne and install your own inner truth in its place." And this is harder today than it was in 1942. Can writes extensively about the concept of AMT, or suggestion. He was talking about early 20th century propaganda and advertising, the ways in which external forces subtly implant desires, fears, and beliefs into our minds until we think they are our own. Imagine what he would say about today's world. We are living in an absolute siege of suggestion. Algorithms are perfectly designed to bypass our rational minds and trigger our deepest anxieties and tribal hatreds. Advertising tells us we are inadequate unless we buy the next product. Political propaganda tells us the world is ending unless we vote a certain way. Our imaginations are completely uncontrolled, running wild with catastrophic scenarios fed to us by glowing rectangles in our pockets. Cowardice in the modern age isn't just running away from a physical fight. Cowardice is the erosion of truth. It is agreeing with a mob on social media because you are afraid of being targeted. It is staying silent when you know something is wrong because you want to protect your social standing. The courage of the sage, therefore, is the ultimate rebellion. Equanimity is not passivity. It is the most active, aggressive defense of your own mind you can possibly mount. It requires you to ruthlessly deconstruct the social illusions around you. It requires a commitment to radical honesty with yourself. It requires disciplined, unbroken judgment of external events, refusing to let the panic of the crowd dictate your heart rate. So, as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a challenge. You don't have to become Confucius tomorrow. You don't have to face an assassin with a smile. But you can start collecting the gold dust. Tomorrow morning, when your alarm goes off, conquer the snooze button. When someone cuts you off in traffic, relax your jaw, drop your shoulders, and practice the outside in composure. When you feel the urge to react to a trivial annoyance, embrace the delay. Build that reservoir of vital energy. Stop revving your engine in neutral. The world is loud, it is chaotic, and the volcano is always rumbling. But you do not have to be the storm. You don't even have to be the music. You can just be the stillness. You can be immovable. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time.